Did you know? Weirdest engines, Oldsmobile's V5 Diesel. Yes, I said V5. Welcome to Muscle Car Masters, where we dive into the craziest GM engines and explore the fascinating world of American muscle cars. On this channel, we bring you in-depth stories and details about the weirdest GM engines that have shaped the automotive landscape. Today, we're focusing on one of the weirdest Oldsmobile's V5 diesel engines, a truly unique and rare piece of automotive history. Developed during a time when General Motors was facing tough fuel economy standards, this engine is not only strange in its design, but also showcases GM's creative solutions to the challenges of the era. Join us as we uncover the story behind this unusual engine and its place in GM's legacy. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Muscle Car Masters for more on the craziest GM engines and other iconic muscle cars. General Motors' struggle with fuel economy. In the 1970s, General Motors faced the daunting challenge of improving fuel efficiency in response to the introduction of corporate average fuel economy standards. Automakers scrambled to adapt, and General Motors' solutions ranged from downsizing vehicles to introducing unconventional engines and transmissions. While some of these ideas were innovative, others proved to be problematic, leaving a lasting mark on automotive history. One such approach involved using the turbo-hydromatic 200 transmission, originally designed for the compact Chevrolet Chevette, in larger vehicles like the Chevrolet Impala. Paired with a 305 cubic inch V8 engine, this transmission, built for smaller, lighter cars, struggled to handle the power and weight of full-size vehicles. Unsurprisingly, reliability issues abounded, leaving drivers frustrated and mechanics busy. Another bold experiment was the introduction of the Oldsmobile diesel engine in the 1978 model year. The concept seemed promising at first. Transform the gasoline-based 350 cubic inch V8 engine into a diesel by strengthening critical components to handle the higher compression ratios of diesel operation. However, execution proved far more challenging than expected. The 350 cubic inch V8 diesel made its debut with outputs of 120 horsepower and 220 pound-feet of torque. Modest numbers, but workable for the era. Unfortunately, several design flaws plagued this engine from the outset. The head bolt clamping force was insufficient to keep the head gasket sealed under high pressure, leading to frequent head gasket failures. Compounding the issue was the lack of a water separator in the fuel system, leaving drivers at the mercy of contaminated diesel fuel. Water in the injection system caused misfires, stalling, and a host of other problems. Beyond technical issues, cultural barriers also hindered the Oldsmobile diesel's acceptance. Many U.S. consumers were unfamiliar with diesel engines in passenger cars. The loud clank, clank, clank of the engine, coupled with thick black exhaust smoke, did little to endear the diesel to a market accustomed to the quiet hum of gasoline engines. As the years went on, the engine's performance declined. By the later iterations, output had dropped to a paltry 105 horsepower and 205 pound-feet of torque, making it woefully underpowered for the 4,000-pound full-size vehicles it was tasked with propelling. 0 to 60 times stretched to an excruciating 18 to 19 seconds, glacially slow even by the standards of the time. In 1979, Oldsmobile introduced a smaller, one-year-only 4.3-liter, 261 cubic inch V8 diesel. Producing just 90 horsepower and 160 pound-feet of torque, this engine was even less capable than its larger sibling. It found its way into select Oldsmobile models, including the Cutlass Salon, Supreme, and Calais, as well as serving as the standard engine in the 1980 Cadillac Seville. However, its lackluster performance and reliability issues ensured its quick demise, disappearing from production by 1982. While GM's foray into diesel engines was intended to address fuel economy concerns, it ended up becoming a cautionary tale. The 350 and 4.3-liter diesels tarnished Oldsmobile's reputation and contributed to skepticism about diesel engines in American cars for decades. These engines might have been a good idea in theory, but in practice, they highlighted the perils of rushing innovative solutions to market without adequate testing and refinement. Expansion of diesel options. In 1982, General Motors took another stab at the diesel game with the introduction of a new 4.3-liter V6 diesel. This engine was designed to work in both longitudinal and transverse setups, making it pretty versatile for General Motors' diverse lineup. But here's the kicker. It only made 85 horsepower and 165 pound-feet of torque. Not exactly earth-shattering numbers, especially for the cars it was powering. On the front-wheel drive side, this little diesel found a home in General Motors' A-body cars like the Chevrolet Celebrity, Pontiac 6000, Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra, and Buick Century from 1982 to 1985. It also showed up in rear-wheel drive A-body models, which General Motors had rebranded as G-body cars by then. Think Chevrolet Malibu, Monte Carlo, Buick Regal, and Oldsmobile Cutlass, Supreme, and Calais, cars that were more about style than performance at this point. Then came 1985, and General Motors decided to go big, well, sort of, by putting this diesel into their full-size front-wheel drive C-body cars for 1 year only. We're talking the Oldsmobile 98, Buick Electra, and Cadillac DeVille. On paper, it sounded like a solid idea, diesel efficiency and roomy, luxury cars, but the reality didn't quite match up. The engine's meager power and so-so performance just couldn't meet consumer expectations. By the end of 1985, General Motors pulled the plug on this V6 diesel experiment. End of the Oldsmobile Diesel Program, 1985. By 1985, millions of Oldsmobile diesels had been sold, but General Motors made the decision to pull the plug on the entire diesel program, abruptly ending it after that year. With issues like the clattering noise, the constant black smoke, and some major mechanical failures plaguing these engines, it's no surprise that customers had enough. After 1985, General Motors discontinued all Oldsmobile V8 and V06 diesel engines. However, before pulling the plug, Oldsmobile was working on a truly bizarre and experimental engine, the V5 Diesel. Yes, you read that right, a V5 diesel engine. It was designed for GM's front-wheel drive X cars, including models like the Chevrolet Citation, Pontiac Phoenix, Buick Skylark, and Oldsmobile Omega. The idea behind a V5 engine? Well, it was a compact solution to the space constraints of the front-wheel drive, transversely mounted engine layout. By eliminating one cylinder, the empty space could be used for accessories like the alternator or the necessary vacuum pump for diesel engines. It was an odd design, and while it didn't make it to production, it stands out as one of the strangest concepts ever developed by General Motors. The V5 diesel engine concept. Now, as for the V5 diesel engine, it's a bit hard to fully grasp the logic behind it. The idea of a V5 engine would have created some serious internal forces, leading to a lot of vibration, which could have made the engine run rough. However, during that time, General Motors wasn't exactly focused on refinement. Just look at the Iron Duke 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine. Reliable but very crude, especially when compared to the smooth V8 engines many drivers were used to. The concept behind the V5 diesel was driven by space constraints in General Motors' front-wheel drive X cars. These cars didn't have a lot of room for a traditional V6 or V8 engine and transmission, so General Motors decided to get creative. Instead of squeezing a full V6 into the tight engine bay, why not just design a V5, leaving the last cylinder empty? The empty space in the V5 engine could then be used for essential accessories, such as the alternator or, in the case of the diesel, a vacuum pump. Diesels don't have a throttle plate, so they require a vacuum pump to power various accessories. It was an interesting approach, and GM had actually considered this idea for gasoline engines in the X cars as well. Ultimately, though, they decided to go with Chevrolet's 2.8-liter V6 engine instead, which was also introduced in these X vehicles. Prototype of the Oldsmobile V5 Diesel. If you take a look at the prototype Oldsmobile V5 Diesel engine, you'll find it now sits proudly in the Ransomey Oldsmobile Museum in Lansing, Michigan. The plaque next to the engine reveals that it displaces 2.5 liters and produces 70 horsepower, along with 111 pound-feet of torque. When you compare these figures, it's easy to see that this engine wasn't exactly going to be a powerhouse in the X cars. At the time, the Iron Duke 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine was already producing about 90 horsepower and 135 pound-feet of torque, which was more than the V5 diesel. V5 diesel design and features. When comparing the V5 diesel to the standard four-cylinder engine used in the X cars, it's clear that the four-cylinder was actually making more power and torque. Looking at the design of the V5 engine, you can see that one bank of the V5 houses 3 cylinders, with the vacuum pump and alternator sitting above in the V-valley. On the opposite bank, there are only 2 cylinders, and General Motors cleverly used this empty space to position the injection pump. The pump used in this prototype was a Bosch design, unlike the typical Russo master pumps found in other Oldsmobile diesel engines. The reason for placing the pump here is that it couldn't fit between the narrow 60-degree V of the engine. The compact design was part of General Motors' effort to make the engine fit within the tight space of the front-wheel drive X cars, but it was also a very unconventional approach. This unique configuration ultimately showcased General Motors' attempt to balance innovation with space constraints. End of the V5 diesel development. Examining the Oldsmobile V5 diesel engine, one can't miss the distinctive logo adorning its intake manifold. This engine boasts a 60-degree V angle, a narrower configuration compared to the 90-degree V found in both the 4.3-liter V6 diesel and Oldsmobile's V8 diesel engines. The 60-degree design aligns more closely with typical V6 layouts, facilitating a more compact fit within the confined engine bays of smaller vehicles. Interestingly, Oldsmobile wasn't alone in exploring V5 engine designs. Volkswagen ventured into this territory by developing a V5 engine derived from their 15-degree VR6, effectively creating a V5 configuration to optimize space in compact car models. Similarly, Honda made notable strides with a V5 engine in their MotoGP racing motorcycle, the RC211V, which competed from 2002 to 2006. This transversely mounted 990 cubic centimeter engine featured 3 cylinders at the front and 2 at the rear, arranged at a 75.5-degree angle to mitigate vibrations caused by the uneven cylinder distribution. The cancellation of the V5 diesel project. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Oldsmobile V5 diesel story is just how close it came to reaching mass production. While officially labeled as experimental, this engine was far beyond the conceptual phase. Multiple individuals from tooling shops have shared that their companies were contracted by General Motors to produce the specialized tools required for manufacturing the V5 Diesel. The engine was clearly deep in development, with significant resources already committed to its production. However, in a surprising turn of events, General Motors abruptly pulled the plug at the 11th hour. These tooling shops were compensated for their cancelled orders, a clear indication that the project had advanced far enough to necessitate such measures. So why did General Motors abandon it after coming so close? It seems the decision boiled down to a mix of practicality, performance, and market dynamics. By this point, General Motors likely realized the V5 Diesel simply wasn't going to deliver enough power or refinement to justify its production. Compared to the more established 4.3-liter V6 diesel, which could be adapted to fit the same A-body cars, the V5's advantages were minimal. Additionally, federal corporate average fuel economy standards, which initially drove the push for extreme fuel efficiency, had been relaxed somewhat. Automakers now had more breathing room and didn't need to resort to such radical measures to meet mileage requirements. At the end of the day, General Motors likely realized that the V5 diesel wasn't going to deliver the power or refinement needed. The crude V5 diesel engine struggled against the 4.3-liter V6, as relaxed CAFE standards reduced extreme fuel economy pressures. By this time, CAFE standards had relaxed, reducing the pressure to meet extreme fuel economy targets. These factors, combined with high development costs, led to the cancellation of this one of the weirdest GM engines. Though it never made it to production, the Oldsmobile V5 Diesel remains a fascinating chapter in the history of the craziest General Motors engines, showcasing General Motors' bold attempt at innovation. If you enjoyed this look at one of the weirdest Oldsmobile's V5 diesel engines, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Muscle Car Masters. Check out the video thumbnails on the bottom left and right for more great content. Thanks for watching.